my name's Pat Willis, and I usually come to the library once a month to do a rag rug course. And I miss it ever so much, and all the lovely people that come. So I'm so glad to have an opportunity to share it with perhaps even more people. The idea is I shall tell you a little bit about rag rugs, and then after that there'll be a session where I teach you how to do it, and the third session will actually give ideas for design and things. So here we go. As I say, my name is Pat Willis, and until 50 years ago the only rug making I knew was hooking rugs that I did with my Irish father. I used to help him cut out the wool and make the rugs. And then I moved to Derbyshire and lived next door to a wonderful couple who showed me their rag rugs, and I was absolutely, if it's not corny to say, hooked. And so for 50 years on and off I've been making rag rugs and sharing them, and people, even more importantly, have been sharing their memories of rag rugs, and which I felt quite honoured about. People just wonder about rag rugs. Originally, they were made out of old coats and blankets, and I did cheat a bit here and dyed a little bit of orange to give it a bit of thing. And you can just see from the back the little squares. So, and then after that, the sky's the limit, really. You can do cushions. You can do stripes in your favourite colours, and you can also, because for 15 years I actually lived in Wales, I did lots of sea rugs, so there's all sorts of different ways that you can use rugs. Originally they were used, apart from on the floor, they were used to put on beds for extra warmth. I asked this lovely old chap what he did with his rugs, and he said, well, we made a new one for the sitting room every Christmas, and then we put that one, when the new one came, we put that one in the scullery, and then after that, I said, what did you do with it? He said, we put it in the dog kennel, and then after that it went into the bottom of the compost heap. So, you know, they've got a very rich history. So, shall I start straight away by showing the sort of way I organise myself before I start? The thing is that at the moment, charity shops have reopened, and they're a lovely source for materials. Also, old clothes that you've either worn out of or you wish desperately you could still wear, but you can't. You can cut those up. People actually do memory rugs. After somebody's died, sometimes they make a rug that's actually got material from their clothes in, and they can look at it and remember. And people say, I used to look and say, that's Grandma's coat. And also, I once did a course with some models, and they were all now about size 12 or 14, which I think would be wonderful. But they used to be 8s and 10s. So what they did was they cut up, including an Aussie Clark dress, made a memory rug, and then on the back they actually stitched the size label and the designer's label. And lots of people do that if they do a memory rug. They put onto the back the name of the person that they're remembering. So it's more than just sitting and doing. And also, I've done lots of workshops with children, and they can really, really go for it and do it. So you could have a family rug, and as long as you've got everything laid out. I get teased because I'm a great believer in baskets, and if you've got your rug that's on the go, on a basket and with some tools that people can pick up, they'll have a go for you as well, so it becomes a real family or community project. Hello again, it's Pat again. I'm just going to now show you how easy it is to do a rag rug. In fact, you'll see this and you think this isn't actually going to work, but I promise it does. I'm going to teach you first of all with half a peg, which is exactly what lots of people used to do, and it's a whittled down one of those, but I'll show you more about that later. You need a piece of hessian. Unfortunately, our local shop in Fakenham doesn't have any anymore, but other shops do, and I know you can get it online because I have as well. And I've cut myself a little square for practicing, and that's the hook, as you can see. Not too sharp because I don't want it to puncture, I just want it to push. I've cut some fabric first of all into little strips, and I take a strip and I make a hole in the hessian, and I push one little corner through, a bit like a rabbit's ear sticking through, and put it halfway, and then I make another hole half an inch away. I'm sorry, it's inches, not centimetres, you'll have to sort that out. And then I push the other one up, and that's it. That is literally all that's to it. You know, and people look at that and say there's no way that can ever be a rug, but it honestly can, because a student I had once, she worked out that 250 later it would make a little cushion. So you then go another ½ inch across, pick up another piece of fabric, they do stick together, push another one in. Don't try to push the whole bit in because it resists. Go for the corners, you know, think rabbit's ear, and it speeds it up. And you see, you can see how it's coming together. Don't, when you're working a rug, try to cram everything too close together, because when you think about it, the only places the material's got to go is in the little holes in the, you know, in the hessian. And if you shove it all in so much, apart from anything else, A, the hessian could break, and B, it would never lay flat because it would be. So you now know how to do a rag rug. And I'm going to do one more. And another one. Put that in. She says, and she's gone from the back. Now, there is another tool that I will show you, because some of you might have an old one. What I like about the peg is old peg rugs is the tradition, and they're so cheap. You can buy a packet of those for about £1 and whittle them down, or find a really nice person who will whittle them down for you. There is another tool which is called a rag rugger, which is this one. Originally, when it was made, it wasn't made until, you know, the manufacturing processes were available, and originally it was a pin that, if you can see closely, it was a pin that was the spring. And with this one, when you're working with a pegged rug, you peg from the back. So when you come, and I'll talk about that later about design, you put your design on the back. With this one, you work from the top, and you go in and up, still the ½ inch apart like you did with your peg. But this time you grab one end, you grab one end and gently twiddle it in, and you end up with the same process. So it's either pegging from the back or rugging from the top. Now, I use both sometimes because I do a lot of rugs, and if you're going to do lots, it's quite nice because you're not using the same hand movements. But I love the pegs best, and the great thing about the pegs is children can join in. You can have several. I've got a little pot here that somebody made me with lots of little pegs in, and you can have one that people can, and people have them in their pockets. And one old lady who came to a talk I gave showed me hers, which was black because she'd been holding it for so long. So just to remind you, in, they do stick together. If you've got a friend, my lovely late husband, if I was doing a big rug, used to spend ages separating them off for me, which was really kind. So if you can talk somebody into doing that, that does speed you up. And then you've got another one. Now the other thing, so you now know how to do it. You know what you need to do it. You know that you could treat yourself to one of these, but I think they're £12 something each now, so you could have one for Christmas, I suppose. The other thing which is very important is to get your materials organised, and don't, I'm bumbling now, I always get my material and I cut it into fairly small pieces, keep the rest somewhere else, and I have a basket which has got fabrics in that are ready to be cut. And then when I cut them, I put them into another basket, just a small basket full, and I don't try to cut. If you tried to cut them all out all over the place, they would just, every time the door opened, you'd lose them. So, and I also think that rag rugs can be like painting. You can have a palette, and if you see the colours that are going round, it encourages you to do it. So the other thing I used to get teased about is the fact I'd say, so while you're waiting for the potatoes to boil, you can cut yourself up a few little strips ready for the next time you work. And you can have it, if you have that in the sitting room or wherever, people will have a go. It looks tidy. I've often said to people who said they started 1 year ago and stopped. I said, did you put it all into a carrier bag and put it under the bed? They said yes, and I said, that's the end of your plan. You have to watch if you've got a cat, because they rummage down in it. So I will remind you, so you know how to do it. 2 holes, 1/2 inch apart. Now all you now need to know is how long to do the fabric, and it's 4 inches by 1.5 inches. Now that gives you a nice pile. If you're working with something like denim, if your kids have grown out their denim trousers and you really would love to use those, you can use denim, but when you think about it, it's all logical, which is what I like. The holes aren't very big, so you can go with the length, but you have to cut them slightly narrower. And it all makes sense. I had some kids children that I'd worked with once years ago, and they put their school uniforms in one when they finished, which was really nice, but they had to do it, slightly narrower. Now, I've got lots of pieces of card here that I always give to people, and I suggest they cut themselves out quite a few. And the other thing is to speed up. When you've got your pieces of fabric, cut into manageable pieces, what I always do is I lay the fabric down and I put my piece of card on top and I whiz along. Now I've now got things that are the right length. Now you don't have to be too careful about, you can then just cut it roughly 1 inch apart. Somebody came on one of my classes once who thought they'd been on a class and they thought you had to draw around each one, where I think you'd give up, wouldn't you really? So you then cut yourself, so it's really quite quick. So you use this, cut yourself big fat strips and then cut the other way, and then, as I say, it is worth, if you've got a lot to do, separating them out, but it's even better if you've got a child or husband or a friend that would do that for you, and then you can really go for it. And the other thing I wanted to show you was, some people have kindly over the years given me tools that they used, so it hasn't got to be half a peg. People gave, one lovely wood carver turned me that. Somebody else used to use a toggle off their duffel coat that they'd outgrown, and in fact, having outgrown it, they put it in a rag rug. So I'm very lucky. So they've all got memories for me. So in the next one, so you now know how to do it. The next one I'll show you about design and how to prepare your main piece of hessian. So now you know how to do it, and you honestly do. I want to talk very briefly about the sort of fabrics that you can then use and cut up. If you get new fabrics, do wash it before you use it, because most fabrics have got starch in and you don't want to be breathing it in. You don't want the fabrics, cotton, linen, if you can get it, thin wool's great, but of course it's expensive. You don't want anything that's going to have, shed too much. I mean, some fabrics that I've used and I've desperately wanted to, I wash them on a very hot wash, which slightly shrinks them, and that does help. And if it's if you're buying from a charity shop, obviously you would perhaps want to wash it anyway, because you don't know if it has been washed, and then you can cut it up, and it makes quite a nice evening actually, cutting off all the seams and discarding, saving the buttons. These 2 buttons here are off something that I used to cut up, so you know, so it's, you don't want things that are going to fray too much. You want to always wash, including new fabrics. If you think it's going to fray, wash them on a hotter wash than you normally would, and it does felt, because that's another way of felting. As you know, if you've washed your best jumper on a on too hot a wash, but you can then, if you do that, you can then use those in a rag rug. You shouldn't mix too many different weights, because when you think about it, you want the levels to be the same, and they do slightly flatten when you're walking on them. So if you've got some that's very thick wool, that's not going to flatten, and you're going to end up with slightly uneven surface. You don't want that. So you can mix different fabrics but of similar weights. So the next one we will be talking about design and how to prepare your hessian for the rug. I want to just show you what to do for the next stage. Now, when you come to do a rug, you have to machine or hand stitch around the edge, because it frays otherwise, as you can imagine. It's all very well on your sample. Don't bother hemming your sample, but when you come to do your piece, that's the way to do it. Go round the edge and then you're ready to go. When you get to the edge with your rug, you can actually work through the double thing. At first, it'll feel a bit stiff, but just say to it, come on, I can do this, and just go. It will actually go through. Now, other people say, but what about designs? Traditionally, the design was, it's not a very good rectangle, but it was, they would have a black edge round the outside and a black or dark diamond in the middle. It's hard to draw standing up. And then they would draw little bits in between. Now, I was told that was because, this was years ago, I was told because the black edge was because they were very often on stone floors for the warmth, and dust came in, so that would catch. And also, when you were standing, doing your potatoes, and you were standing on it, you were tending to stand in the middle, so that's why you had the dark thing. But you don't have to do that anymore. You can if you want to be traditional. What I really love is things like this. Now this is obviously the seaside. And if you look at the back, you can see what I did. On the back of my hessian, I did some random waves and some little corners. Now, the little corners are important because sometimes if it's a memory rug as well about seaside holidays, and you really want to put a little bit of Auntie Gladys's costume in, you haven't got enough to do a whole line, so you can put a little bit in the edge. You can really fit it in. But also, that is a lovely thing to do if you want to do a flower garden. You can have a couple of the double stripes as a path going through, and all the different colours going through. You can also do stripes, which is a nice easy thing to do. That's stripes, and if you look at the back, you can see what I did. I drew. But the other thing about it is, when you first start, don't start at one end and go for it, because your tension will be too tight. You'll be gritting your teeth and it'll be too tight. I suggest that what you do, and also it makes sure your fabric lasts, I sort my fabric out and then I do perhaps a couple of lines there, and then I turn it over and do the same colour that way. That way it helps you work out what colours to use, and you keep going backwards and forwards until you and sometimes you've got more colours than another, so you can really work it out as you go along, and you end up with a nice stripy rug that looks balanced. And if you look at the back, apart from, there's obviously one missing. Somebody must have wanted a piece of red for a project they were doing and I let them have it. They're not close together, are they? You can see the hessian, but you can't at the front. And if you want it to be soft, you don't want it to be too close together. With this one, which was one I made years ago, just to prove, it's very heavy, just to prove that you can use old not like that lady's old wet. Well, oh no, I didn't tell you that, Jojo. I'm so sorry. With this one, I did some diagonal lines in both directions, and then I filled them in. Sometimes I didn't have very much, and I would just fill in a little square. Sometimes you think, well, I haven't got very long to work on it. I'll just do that little square, and don't worry about it not being at the edge. And it definitely keeps your tension better. Now, so what I do is I lay my piece of hessian on the table, but I must warn you about this because of something I did once years ago. I laid it on my dining room table and I used my pen and I drew on the top. And of course, having holes in the hessian, I ended up with a pattern of lots of little dots that would not wash off. So I usually carry a piece, either newspaper or a piece of something that I can work on. So if I wanted this one, I've drawn on there, and then I might think, oh, there's a bit of a gap there, and then you can do some. Can you see how easy it is? And then you can just go for it. So that could be the seaside or something else I did once years ago, which was lovely. It was a bit more fiddly to work, but I used lots of little tiny bits of lace and made a lacy one, which you can do that as well. Now, the other thing I'd like to just show you before I stop is that, don't forget a cushion. And with that one, I did a circle in the middle and then gradually worked that round, and they make really lovely cushions. Now, last autumn, this time last year, we did a project outside of an H table. And so for a cushion rug, I did this. If you look at the back, you can't see all of it because I've stuck something on. I made a little autumn rug, but then on the outside of it, I stuck finds, autumn finds. So obviously you can't sit against it, but and then I stuck a piece of fabric on the back so that I could put a pole in and hang it up. And see, that's a lovely thing for children to do. And if they do as we also did once about 3 years ago here, I did a little seaside one, and people brought in shells and little pieces of driftwood and various things, and then some children made some little, bought some little fish and things that we could hang in. So apart from being a rug, it can also be like a little work of art. Well, all I can say now is the very, very best of luck with it all, and I've had so much pleasure from it, and I'm sure you will as well. And there is going to be, hopefully, a little leaflet that I wrote a long time ago to remind you about the how long and the measurements and things, which hopefully will be online. But basically, 4 inches by 1.5 inches is what you've got to keep in your head, okay, or whatever that is in centimetres, okay. Anyway, the very best of luck, and thank you for having me. This is just a close-up so you can have a really good look at what your pegs have got to look like from all different angles. Cut off and whittled, and you're ready to go. So you've got your hessian. You're making 2 holes. Make a hole. Push the little corner so it looks like a rabbit's ear. Move over 1/2 inch. Make another hole and put another rabbit's ear through. And you've done it. Why I keep on about rabbit's ears is if you try to push the whole of the piece in, it doesn't always want to go, especially if you're using thicker fabric. If you push the corner in, you've got something to pull and bring it in. And you do get into a rhythm. I mean, you might not believe it, but you really do get into a rhythm. And I think, as I said earlier, if you saw the earlier bit, that a student I had with me once learnt how to do it, and she said, I've just worked out it takes 1,000 more to do a rug, but you're doing it gently as you find your fabric and prepare your fabric and wash it, and cut it and get all your pieces separated, and then you do end up with a really nice rug. So just remember, when you've done it, you've got to always sew round the top, round the back, so that it doesn't fray when you get to the edge. And you can, and I'll prove it, you can work through the edge. It might not want to do it, but you talk to it. And both pieces do go through. They do, honestly. And then, as you can see, they cover the edge when you go round to the edge of the rug, so that you can't actually see the hessian at all. Anyway, the very best of luck. And I think you're going to be asked when you've done your rugs if you could send in pictures, because I would absolutely love to see what you do. Anyway, lots of love. Take care.